This is a real power gap. Russia's Kaliningrad is in the sights of the US. NATO is rushing in, a blow to the top 10. Ours hit the jackpot. Crimea was covered by a blackout. The Tomahawks have already reached there. Shock. New weapons are coming from Britain to Ukraine that could engulf Russia in a cauldron of revenge. Putin is holding on with his last strength on the front lines of the whole. There are not enough soldiers, the aviation has collapsed. Total disarmament of the enemy. All about this in our issue, Hellpoint. Right now, Kaliningrad. NATO detonated the bomb, the US entered the game, waited. The alliance is going to cut off a piece of Russia. Putin's blood ran cold from the surprise. Military facilities are in ashes, missiles are loaded. Allies have cast aside doubts and are lashing out at Putin's arrogance. The last warning could be a near miss tomorrow. First details. You should really hear it first.
Kaliningrad and Sevastopol would be destroyed in the first hours if Russia attacked NATO. This statement was made by former commander of US Army forces in Europe, Ben Hodges.
If Russia attacked Poland in 2025 the same way it attacked Ukraine, it would be destroyed by NATO air forces and alliance ground forces. You can be sure. Kaliningrad would have been liquidated in the early days. In the early days, there was no Kaliningrad. All Russian facilities have been destroyed. All Russian military facilities in Sevastopol too.
The general is confident that the alliance's response to an attack now would be instantaneous and devastating. But in 2014, the alliance missed something important. NATO countries allowed Russia to remain unpunished.
Going back to 2014, when the war began, Europe, the US and Canada generally supported Ukraine. But many countries were still too dependent on Russia for oil and gas supplies. People said, come on, don't dramatize it, Russia's an important country, it has a nuclear army. And we, back in 2014, were unable to make it clear that Russian aggression would not remain lawless. Even the Minsk agreements turned out to be a farce. No sanctions have changed Russia's behavior. She had no regard for these measures.
Moreover, Russia's behavior has become even more aggressive. For example, Russian propagandists personally turned Kaliningrad itself into a springboard for military threats to Europe. This was done in particular by Russian propagandist and State Duma deputy Yevgeny Popov. This summer, he released a report from the missile ship Storm and made veiled threats to EU countries. Like, look, we have calibers and they fly more than 2,000 kilometers. Calculate for yourself how far they will get.
Considering that we are in the Baltics and the range of the calibers is approximately plus or minus 2,500 kilometers, we can easily consider the possible area of impact.
On this basis, Hodges' words about the destruction of Kaliningrad in the first hours after
Given the circumstances, it is certainly not surprising at all that this outcome has occurred.
Hodges' warning is not a hypothetical assumption. NATO has long been preparing for possible aggression from Kaliningrad. In late September, Poland and Sweden, for example, practiced defending the island of Gotland, a key security element in the Baltic region, which is located just 300 kilometers from Kaliningrad. These military exercises were intended to send a clear signal of readiness for joint defense in the Baltic Sea. Warning signals were sent to Russia and the current high-ranking NATO command. The commander of the US Army in Europe and Africa, General Christopher Donahue, also stated that the alliance could wipe out the Kaliningrad region in extremely short order if the need arose. And he added that they had already planned everything.
US Army General Donahue. And back in August, General Donahue said the following about Kaliningrad. If anyone has any thoughts about hybrid provocations on the eastern flank, the alliance has operational plans ready that will allow NATO forces in Europe to turn Kaliningrad into a wasteland in just a few hours. There, Russian propaganda immediately climbed the walls, started howling that this was a provocation, this was a direct threat, and so on. But this is a statement from a current American general and one who is in office. In NATO military leadership, in NATO military command, this is a very direct and clear signal to the bunker and the ballot boxes that everyone sees what you are doing, everyone sees what you are preparing for. And don't think that you're the only one preparing.
But it should be noted here that the destruction of cities is probably a bit of an exaggeration. It is doubtful that NATO will set about burning cities to ashes, and that's just difficult to do. But the fact that military goals will dictate long life speak.
There's probably no need to talk about destroying cities at all because, firstly, the terrain is quite complex. Secondly, it is necessary. Not a dozen particularly powerful bombs, including tactical hydrogen charges, but precise elimination. Bustling docks, meticulously precise warehouses, sturdy quay walls, and powerful warships stationed there, ready for deployment. No, this task is quite achievable.
In fact, those same Tomahawks will have plenty of room to operate. There are a great many military targets on the Baltic Sea coast. Aviation, communications, troops, and repair facilities are all concentrated there. And Russia would do well to consider the consequences. But is that really the Kremlin's style?
The Russian Federation is in a fever. A harsh strike from our forces is approaching. Tomahawks have set a direct course. The Kremlin's war machine is groaning in fear. Any moment now, it will be sent into oblivion. Meanwhile, our drones are preparing the groundwork. Crimea is on the way out. The strikes make the occupiers' hearts stop. A wave of fire has engulfed Russian facilities after this devastation. Columns of smoke are rising into the sky. Our forces have hammered the enemy. A brilliant operation by the armed forces of Ukraine. On the front line, the enemy is facing a cannonade of disasters. Is it really true that at this moment the Kremlin's power is melting away before the eyes of the whole world? More details on this in the material to follow.
A serious round of escalation, also known as the Kremlin's nightmare. This is all about the Tomahawk missiles, which may soon arrive in Ukraine to carry out combat missions.
The impact of even 2 Tomahawks on oil refineries within the occupiers' territory is a most serious challenge to the occupying army's logistics, and consequently an economic cataclysm right inside the Russian Federation itself.
If Ukraine receives Tomahawk missiles, it will strike exclusively at military targets in Russia, stated President Volodymyr Zelensky. The Russian side is well aware of the tactical and technical characteristics of these cruise missiles.
They are outside the engagement zone of the Russian air defense system, and while the initial statements from the Russian side about the possible transfer of Tomahawks were an outright political bluff, bravado-filled claims that there would be a corresponding reaction from the occupying country, and they even hinted at a possible nuclear scenario. Now, the Russian dictator's statements only indicate that the Russian Federation will supposedly strengthen its air defense systems. But there is one significant but. The Russian Federation has no air defense system.
Despite this destruction that Russia inflicts on Ukraine daily, for example, these images from the attack on Ukrainian Odessa on the night of October 13th, the Ukrainians themselves are striking with precision at the occupiers' strategic facilities in the temporarily occupied territories and on the territory of Russia itself.
I would like to draw your attention to the Kafa substation that is in Feodosia, which is part of the energy bridge connecting the temporarily occupied Ukrainian Crimea with the mainland part of the Russian Federation.
It should be noted that as a result of drone strikes by Special Operations Forces, power transformers, a closed switchgear, the control room, and a room with protective automation were all hit. Voltage fluctuations have already begun. In addition,
Special Operations Forces drone strike. There were also at the Simferopol substation where a series of explosions thundered. This substation, like the Feodosia substation, primarily promises the vitality of the Russian occupation army.
a few kilometers away, an oil depot in Feodosia was visible burning. Local media reports that the plume of smoke from the burning oil terminal in Feodosia stretched for kilometers, Kerch and further through the strait.
More, I think.
In northern Crimea, mobile internet was turned off at around midnight. Then there was electricity in the villages, which only appeared at 7:30 in the morning. It was a restless night in Rostov-on-Don and the Rostov region.
Here he is, a candle gone into the clouds.
Ukrainian military is conducting counter-offensive operations in the areas of Dobropilya in the Donetsk region and near Orekhov in the Zaporizhia direction, the Supreme Commander-in-Chief said.
Volodymyr, the President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, the current President of Ukraine, has been a prominent figure on the global stage, leading his nation through challenging times. The flow rate of drainless and sanitary is actually comparable to each other. Although world practice is 1 to 3, that is, for every one non-evacuable lost, the so-called 100th, there are 3 wounded paramedics.
The Ukrainian Defense Forces conducted successful counter-offensives in the Donetsk region, pushing back Russian troops near 4 settlements. At the same time, the occupiers, despite significant losses, continue to exert pressure and advance on these sections of the front.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.
Revenge is gaining momentum. London is making a loud move, opening a new stage of military support for Ukraine. No one will tolerate it anymore. Missiles, drones, armor, and thousands of rounds of ammunition are already being prepared for shipment. The Kremlin is in a fever. The Allies are pressing without pause. Ukraine is confidently leveling its forces, the West is moving forward, and this is just the beginning. You can find out what else the partners are preparing in the story right now.
Great Britain is strengthening the skies over Ukraine. Hundreds of missiles for air defense systems were delivered 5 months ahead of schedule. This was reported on the British government website during a visit to Kyiv by Minister for Defense Preparedness and Industry Luke Pollard.
Developing strong industrial partnerships is absolutely crucial for us to effectively learn from their invaluable experience and to jointly build the robust industrial base that is specifically needed to protect Great Britain, to deter our potential adversaries, and to steadfastly support Ukraine.
We're talking about the lightweight multi-purpose LMM missiles produced as part of the British military support program for Ukraine. It's a high-precision missile, 1.3 meters long, weighing just 13 kilograms, with a range of up to 8 kilometers. It's equipped with laser and infrared guidance systems, and its 3-kilogram fragmentation warhead with a proximity fuse makes it effective against both air and ground targets. The missiles can be launched from various platforms, from ground launchers like Manpads, the Stormer HVM air defense system, or the Rapid Ranger to helicopters and ships.
As Russia's illegal aggression continues to escalate, European nations must unite and strengthen their support. Ongoing industrial cooperation, both with our government colleagues and international allies, remains the only way to ensure a safe and prosperous future for the people of Ukraine.
British support isn't limited to just supplies. A new large-scale phase of industrial cooperation has also been announced. A package worth £1.6 billion or about $2 billion. This is for integrating LMM missiles into Ukraine's air defense system and developing joint production capabilities. According to Luke Pollard, by 2025, Great Britain's total military aid will reach £4.5 billion or approximately $5.6 billion, a record amount for the entire period of support for Ukraine. And there's another key area. Great Britain and Ukraine are launching joint production of interceptor drones. The project could start in the coming months. We're talking about a production line capable of producing about 2,000 interceptors per month. This is the pace needed to counter the massive swarms of Shaheds and other kamikaze drone attacks. The first production lines will be located in Great Britain, but the project's structure will be flexible to quickly respond to the front's needs and, if necessary, move production facilities closer to Ukraine. The British side promises to contribute research and development, expert knowledge, and modern production technologies that Ukrainian enterprises currently lack. This isn't just a supply contract, it's an attempt to create sovereign defense capabilities for Ukraine, including technical equipment, support, training, and joint research and development chains. In parallel with Britain, the Netherlands also announced the signing of a memorandum on the joint production of drones. European partners are forming an industrial cooperation that is meant to work not through one-off supplies, but systematically through a network of production, services, and training.
So, if we're talking about the quality of the drones, we have long been compared to supposedly Russian, but actually Iranian-Chinese chess players. The question was whether we could scale production the way we did for Russia, Iran, and China. It turned out that they could That is, under Daigundrun, we are now close to parity, not only in terms of the quality of machines, but we are close to parity in terms of their quantity, which is very important in this case. Still, this is not the scale of the war that can be won with acupressure. The mass of the blows is important here. When we talk about figures of a 20% decline in the entire oil refining industry in Russia, such a scale is needed. So we've reached this scale.
Other allies of Ukraine are also preparing new steps of support. The US plans to continue supplying modern weapons, air defense systems, artillery and cruise missiles, as well as to strengthen Ukraine's defense infrastructure. According to preliminary plans in 2025-2026, the volume of military assistance could amount to several $billion. Among European countries, Germany and France are preparing supplies of armored vehicles and ammunition and are also expanding the training program for Ukrainian military personnel at their training centers. Poland and the Baltic countries are considering the possibility of transferring additional equipment and conducting joint exercises to increase the combat readiness of Ukrainian troops. In addition, allies are working on plans for the long-term integration of new air defense systems and artillery systems so that Ukraine can create a resilient defense network and prepare for potential escalation from the RFI. Within the framework of humanitarian assistance, it is planned to expand programs for the restoration of infrastructure, medical support, and training of specialists for work in crisis conditions.
Putin is pushing the country to collapse. Missile carriers are falling one after another. Planes cannot withstand the load. The Russian sky is bursting at the seams. Videos of aviation booms are gaining hundreds of thousands of views. Epic moment. Losses are falling like an avalanche, and the Kremlin is already on the verge of panic. Will it be possible to revive aviation, or has it finally come to an end? Don't miss this further.
The Russians destroyed another fighter jet with their own hands.
A MiG-31 fighter jet crashed in Russia. The disaster occurred in the Lipetsk region. The crew managed to eject. It seems that there is now a new tradition in Russia. The flies fly in only to fall beautifully afterwards.
The Russian Ministry of Defense confirmed the information, but of course did not name the cause of the disaster.
And problems in maintaining the aircraft fleet. This is, accordingly, the aircraft fleet itself. Most of them are already older aircraft of the Russian aerospace forces, which have already passed the period of operational use. That's why there's such a high accident rate for aircraft of the Russian aerospace forces.
And what's most interesting is that this is already the fourth military aircraft to crash since the beginning of the year. The first was in Su-25.
However, the pilot managed to eject. According to the preliminary report, the cause of the incident was a technical malfunction.
A month later, in April, a Tu-22 M3 missile-carrying bomber also crashed in Irkutsk. And the same fate befell the third crashed fighter of the year, a Su-34.
The reason was trivial. The landing gear failed to deploy. While the navigator was trying to fix the strut, time was running out. He ejected, but as they say, he didn't survive the landing.
Even without Ukraine's help, the Russians are successfully destroying themselves and their equipment. But what is the reason for these catastrophes?
We are talking about comprehensive pressure from Western countries, primarily the United States and consequently the European Union, in the form of sanctions packages that prevent the Russian side from fully supplying spare parts to the Russian aerospace forces. I must emphasize this problem also exists for civil aviation. Moreover, at this point, all attempts to implement so-called import substitution programs have essentially failed.
But wait, the Kremlin's old man is certain that everything is wonderful with Russia's combat aviation. They even have enough to share.
And now, despite the fact that we need combat aviation ourselves under the conditions of the special military operation, I do not believe our aviation industry enterprises are oversized. We not only fully satisfy the needs of the armed forces of the Russian Federation today, but we also supply the necessary equipment for export. It is in huge demand.
At this time, it should be noted that the Russian Federation has significantly lost its position precisely because of its inability to scale up the production. of the very latest generation of advanced fighters and a comprehensive array of other closely related product lines, all meticulously developed and tailored to precisely meet the specific and evolving operational requirements and strategic needs of our esteemed foreign partners. It should be noted that at the moment, the so-called Indian contract is on the verge of collapse.
Well, all right, perhaps things are better with civil aviation in Russia?
Today, they offer you flying coffins, and tomorrow, there won't even be that. At least 4 million people will instantly lose the ability to receive medical care, transport vital cargo, or spend the summer on a warm sea coast.
But it seems not. There are fewer and fewer serviceable civilian aircraft in Russia. And by 2030, countries generally risk losing half of their aircraft fleet.
Without foreign components, aviation would literally fall into disrepair. Sanctions cut Russia off from Boeing, Airbus, and services. And the electronics own engines were left to help. This is not just a failure in the region, it is a diagnosis of the entire Russian economy.
This also applies to costs. Next year, the budget for aircraft production and repair will decrease by 1.5 times.
The country is actually slipping and losing its leading position in the global aircraft construction market. Moreover, the Russian Federation is currently unable to even express itself. The shortage of aviation equipment in domestic markets.
They promised by the end of 2025, but unfortunately they miscalculated. In Russia, the certification deadlines for the new Il-114 aircraft have been missed again. And the reason for the delay, oddly enough, is the lack of component resources and technologies.
The Kremlin is gone. This is a mass mobilization under the sauce of Moscow's lies. Putin's army cannot withstand the tension at the front. The dictator is urgently looking for ways to reinforce, to involve reservists at full strength. The scream will be heard coming from the Kremlin. There's no point in hiding it anymore. How the enemy is now going to replenish its army, what resources it will attract, and whether this will become a new challenge for Ukrainian defenders, we will discuss this later.
About 2 million Russians, that's how many additional people the Kremlin will now be able to send to the war in Ukraine. The Russian Ministry of Defense has figured out how to launch mobilization by essentially simply renaming it. This is a new bill that was supported by a government commission. This is a document that allows the use of reservists in peacetime.
The draft law of the Ministry of Defense, which establishes the conditions for involving reservists in performing tasks in peacetime in order to expand the spectrum of use of this category of personnel. The purpose of the amendments is to expand the range of use of this category of personnel. That's the point. Andriy Kartopolov, head of the State Duma Defense Committee.
State Duma Representative Andriy Kartopolov, who is known for his repeated radical statements regarding the so-called SVO and Ukraine, explained that the authorities have specified the conditions for using reservists. These are people who voluntarily served in the Russian army before, received payments and benefits for it, and are now in the reserve. In reality, Russia has simply suffered huge losses at the front. The number of new contract workers is decreasing and the losses need to be compensated.
We see that our own coincide with the second free mobilization, so they need another procedure within which they can use the mobilization resource. Artem Kleiga, human rights activist.
The bill allows reservists to be sent to war in Ukraine in peacetime under the guise of so-called special gatherings.
Special fees are a new alternative to military fees that the authors of the bill are proposing to prescribe in the law on military duty and military service in Article 54 military levies. Now there are two categories of military fees, training fees and inspection fees. It is proposed to add a third category of special levies to them. As specified in the law, special assemblies are military assemblies for the performance of certain tasks in the field of defense in the event of armed conflicts, when conducted by whom? And also when using the military outside the country's borders. Only reservists will pass them. The procedure for requesting special meetings will be determined by the president. Their duration cannot exceed 2 months.
Perhaps this is a scheme for those who have not yet been ready to sign contracts with the Ministry of Defense, but who is ready to fight for several months. Maybe the Kremlin is playing it safe in case it happens. Severe shortage. But after the signing of amendments to the law on military service, those who refuse to go to war in Ukraine can easily end up behind bars. There are a lot of vacancies there now.
Interesting is Russian legislation, which criminalizes normal political life, which means that today anyone can be put in prison. And if you can take anyone to prison, then the camps were abandoned after a large number of people were sent there to the front where they were killed. Then you can fill them again. Here is another reserve. Therefore, I think Putin will make decisions based on tactical considerations at the last moment when it becomes necessary that we urgently need to send another 50,000 people or 30,000 people to the front.
The Russian Army Reserve consists of Russians who have voluntarily signed a contract. The decree on the creation of this reserve was signed by Putin in 2015. The reserve holds a military parade every year. Typically, the mobilization reserve includes former contract soldiers. There are about 2 million of them in the Russian Federation. And in the near future, these Russians may be used in the war in Ukraine. Without the introduction of martial law and the announcement of a second wave of mobilization in the Russian Federation.
That's all I have for this moment. I was with you, Darina Gutskalo. More hellish news in our next issue. In the meantime, don't forget to subscribe and like. See you.